இந்த பிரிண்ட் அவுட் பண்ணு நான் என்ன அதுல எனக்கு இதெல்லாம் ஸ்பீச் இதுல ஸ்பீச் இதுல ஸ்பீச் ஒன் செகண்ட் இங்க பேஸ் பண்ணு இங்க இருந்து அப்படி
No, அங்கால பேஸ் பண்ணாங்கன்னா இந்த பகுதி இதுல இருக்கு செஷன். Can they stand somewhere here on the front of it?
Hey, how are you?
No problem. Hi, how are you? Sorry? I'm not. She's on her way.
Okay, good. I'm Ravi.
Hey, Rob. I'm
Nice
Shamila.
Nice to meet you. Shamila?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So you're set up, you got what you need?
Yeah, we are done. We just want to put the organization and that's it. We are done.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, எந்த படம் ஏதாவது
அந்த பக்கம் இருங்க.
அதுல
I know why அப்பா. கொஞ்சம் காரணம் நாங்கள் வேரோடி வாழ்ந்த மண்ணை விட்டுட்டு வந்தோம். வேரோடி வாழ்ந்த மண்ணை விட்டுட்டு வந்தோம். சீரோடும் சிறப்போடும் வாழ்ந்த மக்கள், சீரோடும் சிறப்போடும் வாழ்ந்த மக்கள் இன்று போராடி வாழ்வதனை கொண்டு செல்கின்றோம். போராடி வாழ்வதனை கொண்டு செல்கின்றோம். என்ன சொல்லி அழுகின்றோம் எங்கள் கதையை யாரிடம் போய் முறையிடுவோம் எங்கள் வழியை. என்ன சொல்லி அழுகின்றோம் எங்கள் சொந்தங்களை உறவுகளை இழந்து விட்டோம். இழந்து விட்டோம். சொந்தங்களை உறவுகளை இழந்து விட்டோம். எங்கள் சொத்துக்களை சுகங்களை தொலைத்து விட்டோம். சொந்தங்களை உறவுகளை இழந்து விட்டோம். எங்கள் சொத்துக்களை சுகங்களையும் தொலைத்து விட்டோம். சொந்தமாக இருந்தவர்கள் சொல்லிக் கொடுத்தார். சொந்தமாக இருந்தவர்கள் சொல்லிக் கொடுத்தார். தாங்கள் சொர்க்கத்தினை அனுபவிக்க நம்மை விட்டார். தாங்கள் சொர்க்கத்தினை அனுபவிக்க நம்மை விட்டார். என்ன சொல்லி அழுகிறோம் யாரிடம் போய் முறையிடுவோம் எங்கள் வழி. என்ன சொல்லி அழுகிறோம் வழிநடத்த தலைவனை நாம் வைத்திருந்தோம். வழிநடத்த தலைவனை நாம் வைத்திருந்தோம். இப்போ வாழ்ந்திடத்தான் வழி என்று நாம் வாடுகிறோம். வாழ்ந்திடத்தான் வழி என்று நாம் வாடுகிறோம். ஊழிக்காலம் வந்து கழித்த ஊர்களிலே ஊழிக்காலம் வந்து கழித்த ஊர்களிலே இன்று உக்கி போன வாழ்வினை உக்கி போன வாழ்வினை என்ன செய்ய கேட்பதற்கு யாரும் இல்லையா? கேட்பதற்கு யாரும் இல்லையா? உலகில் சொந்தமாக ஒரு நாடு உலகிற்கும் யாரும் உதவவில்லை. நமக்கு உகந்த தீர்ப்பினையும் வழங்கவும் இல்லை. விலகிச் சென்றிடாமல் நாம் போராடுவோம். உங்கள் வீரர்களின் விருப்பத்தை நாம் காப்பாற்றுவோம். வீரர்களின் விருப்பத்தை நாம் காப்பாற்றுவோம்.
பாட்டு போடுறதுக்கு நினைக்க வேண்டிக்கிறாரு.
அழுதிடுவோம் எங்கள் கதையை என்ன சொல்லி அழுதிடுவோம் எங்கள் கதையை நாம் யாரிடம் போய் முறையிடுவோம் எங்கள் வலியை சொல்லும் கதை கேட்பதற்கு யாரும் இல்லையா சொல்லும் கதை கேட்பதற்கு யாரும் இல்லையா உலகில் சொந்தமாக நமக்கு நாடு இல்லையா சொந்தமாக நமக்கு என்ன சொல்லி அழுகிறோம் போராடி போராடி உயிர் கொடுத்தோம் போராடி போராடி உயிர் கொடுத்தோம் நாங்கள் வேரோடி வாழ்ந்த மண்ணை விட்டுட்டு வந்தோம் வேரோடி வாழ்ந்த மண்ணை விட்டுட்டு வந்தோம் சீரோடும் சிறப்போடும் வாழ்ந்த மக்கள் சீரோடும் சிறப்போடும் வாழ்ந்த மக்கள் இங்கே போராடி வாழ்வதனை கொண்டு செல்கின்றோம் போராடி வாழ்வதனை கொண்டு செல்கின்றோம் என்ன சொல்லி அழுகின்றோம் எங்கள் கதையை யாரிடம் போய் முறையிடுவோம் எங்கள் வழியை என்ன சொல்லி அழுகின்றோம் சொந்தங்களே உறவுகளே இழந்து விட்டோம் சொந்தங்களே உறவுகளே இழந்து விட்டோம் உங்கள் சொத்துக்களை சுகங்களை தொலைத்து விட்டோம் சொந்தங்களே உறவுகளே இழந்து விட்டோம் உங்கள் சொத்துக்களை சுகங்களையும் தொலைத்து விட்டோம் சொந்தமாக இருந்தவர்கள் சொல்லி கொடுத்தார் சொந்தமாக இருந்தவர்கள் சொல்லி கொடுத்தார் தாங்கள் சொந்தத்தினை அனுபவிக்க நம்மை விட்டார் தாங்கள் சொந்தத்தினை அனுபவிக்க நம்மை விட்டார் என்ன சொல்லி அழுகிறோம் யாரிடம் போய் முறையிடுவோம் எங்கள் வழியை என்ன சொல்லி அழுகிறோம் வழிநடத்த தலைவனை நாம் வைத்திருந்தோம் வழிநடத்த தலைவனை நாம் வைத்திருந்தோம் இப்போ வாழ்ந்திடத்தான் வழி என்றே நாம் வாடுகிறோம் வாழ்ந்திடத்தான் வழி என்றே நாம் வாடுகிறோம் ஊழிக்காலம் வந்து கழித்த ஊர்களிலே ஊழிக்காலம் வந்து கழித்த ஊர்களிலே இன்று துக்கி போன வாழ்விலே துக்கி போன வாழ்விலே என்ன சொல்லி கேட்பதற்கு யாரும் இல்லையா கேட்பதற்கு யாரும் இல்லையா உலகில் சொந்தமாக உலகிற்கும் உலகிற்கும் யாரும் உதவவில்லை நமக்கு உகந்த தீர்வினையும் வழங்கவும் இல்லை விலகிச் சென்றிடாமல் நாம் போராடுவோம் உங்கள் வீரர்களின் விருப்பத்தை நாம் காப்பாற்றுவோம் வீரர்களின் விருப்பத்தை நாம் காப்பாற்றுவோம் எழுதிடுவோம் எங்கள் கதையே, என்ன சொல்லி அழுதிடுவோம் எங்கள் கதையே, நாம் யாரிடம் போய் முறையிடுவோம் எங்கள் வலியை, சொல்லும் கதை கேட்பதற்கு யாரும் இல்லையா, சொல்லும் கதை கேட்பதற்கு யாரும் இல்லையா, உலகில் சொந்தமாக நமக்கு ஒரு நாடு இல்லையா, சொந்தமாக நமக்கு ஒரு நாடு இல்லையா, என்ன சொல்லி அழுகிறோம். போராடி போராடி உயிர் கொடுத்தோம், போராடி போராடி உயிர் கொடுத்தோம், நாங்கள் வேரோடி வாழ்ந்த மண்ணை விட்டுட்டு வந்தோம், வேரோடி வாழ்ந்த மண்ணை விட்டுட்டு வந்தோம், சீரோடும் சிறப்போடும் வாழ்ந்த மக்கள், சீரோடும் சிறப்போடும் வாழ்ந்த மக்கள், இங்கே போராடி வாழ்வதனை கொண்டு செல்கின்றோம், போராடி வாழ்வதனை கொண்டு செல்கின்றோம், என்ன சொல்லி அழுகின்றோம் எங்கள் கதையை, நாம் யாரிடம் போய் முறையிடுவோம் எங்கள் வழியை, என்ன சொல்லி அழுகின்றோம் எங்கள் சொந்தங்களை உறவுகளை இழந்து விட்டோம், இழந்து விட்டோம், சொந்தங்களை உறவுகளை இழந்து விட்டோம், உங்கள் சொத்துக்களை சுகங்களை தொலைத்து விட்டோம், சொந்தங்களை உறவுகளை இழந்து விட்டோம். அந்த பக்கமா எல்லாரும் நின்னா என்ன, நான் இதுலதான் நிக்க போறேன். நீங்க என்ன வைக்க போறீங்க?
Just ask them to come.
Hello. Can we get started? Please come closer to the North Carolinians for Peace sign. Okay. Vanakkam. Good evening. I am Shantini Jayaraja, President of North Carolinians for Peace. I will be serving as the moderator today. Today, we mark the 13th anniversary of May 18, 2009, the day on which the decade-long civil war in Sri Lanka ended in Mullivaikkaal. The day is observed as the Mullivaikkaal Remembrance Day and the Tamil Genocide Day. To remember and honor the thousands of Tamil men, women, and children who perished in Mullivaikkaal and all those who lost their lives to the 30-year-old genocidal civil war, let us observe a minute of silence. Thank you. In the days leading up to May 18, 2009, thousands of Tamil civilians who were trapped in a small strip of land with limited food and water were killed by indiscriminate shelling and bombing by the Sri Lankan armed forces as they sought refuge in the no-fire zones. According to a UN report, 70,000 were killed and many more were injured and forcefully disappeared. More than 146,000 are still unaccounted for. Grave human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, torture, and sexual violence were committed by the armed forces against Tamils during and after the end of the war. No one has been held accountable yet for these genocidal acts and mass atrocities. The government that was responsible for the killings in 2009 gained power again in 2009 and continues to militarize the north and east where a majority of Tamils live, changing the demography and cultural identity of Tamils. Although the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has resigned recently due to the economic crisis and pressure from the public, his brother Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who directed the armed forces during the war, remains in power as president. Today, as the Tamils mourn the loss of Tamil lives and the entire country faces catastrophic economic crisis, the army announced that 396 of their officers and 8,000 in other ranks have been promoted. While welcoming the targeted US sanctions against some alleged war criminals, we urge the US government to expand the sanction and ensure those who committed the war crimes are punished. We urge that the international community and US must not forget accountability for war crimes and justice for the victims. North Carolinians for Peace stands in solidarity with the victims' families and survivors as they seek accountability and justice. We will continue to advocate for Tamils' rights and self-determination as we have done for the past 25 years. We also express solidarity with the Ukrainian people as they are subjected to genocide, and those in Sri Lanka carrying out the Gota Go Home protest in response to the economic crisis. We are thankful that you have joined us today to promote awareness to these issues and support our efforts. You will be hearing speeches, readings, and poems about the war and its impact from our community members and uplifting messages from distinguished guests. Now, I invite Lenuga to read a few passages from the book, Still Counting the Red, Survivors of Sri Lanka's Hidden War, written by Francis Harrison.
There was shelling everywhere. Around the clock, at nighttime, you can't imagine. You had to catch sleep whenever you could. The nights were worst. If the shelling starts, all the children will holler, Amma, Amma. They were scared, and it was hard to control them. She remembers. Bahavan started working as an ambulance driver, rushing the injured to hospital. One day in the last week of January, while he was out at work, she heard the doctors on the radio appealing for blood and decided to donate. It was my 7th time, she says, explaining for my benefit. You see, if you live in a war-torn country, you do it often. Uma's nephew wanted to come with her, but he'd never given blood and was nervous. They rode their bicycles the 1.5 kilometers to the local school, which had been turned into a hospital. It was shocking to see. The classrooms and even the verandas filled with wounded, while in the hospital grounds the dead were laid out next to the injured. You couldn't make sense of anything because everybody was wailing and the relatives of the patients were trying to get attention for their loved ones, and the staff, who were so few, were desperate. Uma recalls, when you go to a hospital, you think now everything will be all right, but that wasn't the case here. As his blood group was being identified, Uma's nephew said, "Thank God we decided to come." But after they finished, the boy began to feel a little queasy at the sight of the blood. Under all that stress, the hospital staff somehow managed to bring him a cup of hot tea, through without milk, which was already scarce. Suddenly, the hospital building came under attack. Bam, bam, bam. The shelling started. So many shells fell into the school grounds. My nephew just threw the cup of tea away. But where to go and what to do? The wounded were being wounded again. Their relatives were being wounded. We rushed out of the building, leaving our bikes there. We didn't even remember we bought them. We ran all the way home. There was human flesh torn and hanging from everywhere, and blood. It was horrible. They arrived home with their clothes splattered in blood, alarming their friends and neighbors. They'd lost the little piece of cotton wool. They'd been given to press down on the vein where blood had been taken, and all the exercise had pumped the blood out of their veins. Today, Uma can't stop thinking about all those people kneeling in the hospital. They were calling on all their deities, begging the gods to save them. But all they got was shells, she says, adding that she can no longer believe in God after what she's seen.
Thank you, Lenuga. It has become a tradition to light the candle at 1818 on May 18th to signify the date and time the war ended. Now let's light the candle and give hope for the victims, families, and survivors.
வடிந்த பொழுதுகளே நாம் குளறி அழுத இரவுகளே குருதி வடிந்த பொழுதுகளே நாம் குளறி அழுத இரவுகளே இறுதியில் நடந்தது அழிவுகளே இறுதியில் நடந்தது அழிவுகளே இதற்கு இல்லையாயும் தீர்வுகளே சாகவா பிறந்தது எவ்வினம் இங்கே சாவணி சுமப்பதேன் தினம் தினமே வெகுதே எங்களின் ஆழ்மனமே இந்த வழியினை சொல்வது யாரிடமோ யாரிடமோ வெற்றிகள் பெற்று நாம் வாழ்வதற்கு இருந்தது தருணங்கள் இங்கே வேண்டும் என்று ரகமெல்லாம் நம்மை எதிர்த்ததால் நிகழ்ந்தது மரணங்கள் கருணம் கூட வாங்கியது எங்கள் சாகண்டு உலகமே முடிகிறது மரணம் போல எனக்கு இந்த பேரும் மலை போல் கனவும் கலங்கியது முள்ளிவாய்க்காலின் வேதனைகள் எதிரிக்கும் கூட வேண்டாமே வேண்டாமே.
Now I invite North Carolina Senator, State Senator Wiley Nickel to speak. Wiley has just won the primary to become the congressional candidate for North Carolina District 13. Wiley doesn't need any introduction. Most of you know, so let's hear him.
Thank you so much. Vanakkam. As everyone knows, I represent Cary and Raleigh in the North Carolina State Senate, and I'm truly honored to be here. Through the years, I've been honored to call so many in our Tamil American community dear friends, and I'm humbled to be asked to speak on Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day and to join this community in this sacred space as we honor the memory of the lives lost and recommit ourselves to the pursuit of justice. 13 years ago, the Tamil people of Sri Lanka were victims of genocide, as the Sri Lankan government deliberately targeted Tamil civilian populations, resulting in the death of between 70,000 and 170,000 people in the final months of the war. I stand with you in recognizing the Tamil genocide. Together, we are going to fight for genocide recognition here in the United States and internationally. Over successive Sri Lankan governments, there has been no meaningful accountability or justice for victims, and the Tamil community has continued to face discrimination and political oppression. for a peaceful future on the island of Sri Lanka, the demands for justice and accountability of the victims and survivors of the Tamil Genocide must be met. For true peace, there must finally be a political solution that addresses the root cause of the armed conflict and meaningfully accounts for the democratic demands of the Tamil people. A durable and sustainable political solution is the key to addressing long-standing tensions and advancing justice and human rights. That's why I'm honored to work with the Tamil American community as an advocate for accountability and a political solution for the Tamil people of Sri Lanka. Together, we have worked to educate other elected officials and the broader public on the plight of the Tamil people. And this is a fight that I hope to continue for you as your United States representative in Congress. A commitment to human rights and freedom in Sri Lanka is not only critical to the future of the Tamil people, but to the future of the entire Indo-Pacific region. And the United States must be clear on this. Genocide cannot be committed with impunity. The international community must reaffirm its commitment to human rights in Sri Lanka through an international accountability mechanism. And the United States can and must be a leader in this. We cannot rest until the Tamil people receive true justice and accountability. So in conclusion, on this Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day, I remain awed by the resilience of this community. I mourn with you, and I stand with you on this journey towards justice.
Thank you, Senator Wiley, and you have always been a friend of ours, and we count on you, and our support is with you. Thank you. Next, we will play a message from North Carolina Congresswoman Deborah Ross.
I'm Congresswoman Deborah Ross, and on this Tamil Remembrance Day, I want you to know that I stand with you on acknowledging the genocide and fighting for human rights for Tamils in Sri Lanka. I have been working with the Tamil community for years on this and in Congress. We've had a hearing exposing the atrocities, and we have a resolution. I also want you to know that at this crucial time of tumult in Sri Lanka, I am looking for opportunities to bring these issues to light and to have a government that is fair and free of humanitarian abuse. I'm with you on this. I am your friend. Thank you so much.
We thank Congresswoman Deborah Ross for the uplifting message. I now invite Lauren Xavier to read a passage from a note from the No Fire Zone written by Cass Gayuri.
Some people slept in bunkers made of sand to protect themselves from the military. It was a fortification to protect themselves from the artillery attacks. The bunkers were sand trenches dug out in the ground. However, when they were bombarded with aerial attacks, the sand bunkers, which were once homes to Tamil civilians, became graves after the military attacks. The explosions caused internal ear injuries to others. I could not sleep because of the sound of the continuous shelling. The doctors rotated with their scheduled sleep times. I did not want to sleep in the sand bunker trenches because of the lack of oxygen. I slept outside on the beach sand under the palmyra tree. The palmyra tree became my shelter and my bedroom. With beach sand, I made a makeshift pillow. I covered my sand pillow with the saram or lungi, better known as a sarong in the Western culture. I tied another saram tightly around my head and ears like a bandage to filter out the noise from the military bombs and shelling. I used the palmyra fruit to wash my clothing, as the other civilians did. There was no soap. The palmyra fruit was used as soap. Unfortunately, the cows included the palmyra fruit in their diet. Therefore, when the people hung their clothing to dry, the smell of the palmyra fruit attracted the cows, and they ate the clothing. I used another saram or sarong as a blanket. I was subject to shelling, snake bites, and insect bites. It became dangerous sleeping in loose ocean sea sand outside. The Red Cross members slept at the church. They were guests of the priests and nuns. Later, I was invited to stay at the church with Dr. Thangamuthu Satrayamurthy. We could not sleep at the hospital because of continuous hysterical crying. Crying became animated. It was histrionic crying that filled the wards of the hospital day and night. Crying became contagious. People cried watching others cry uncontrollably. I could not keep a stone face watching them cry. Crying was like a relay sport. The church was 1 mile from the hospital. My mother was nearby, so she cooked for me and did my laundry. The Tamil Rehabilitation Organization, TRO, delivered food to the patients, such as dal, rice, curry, and dried fish. However, due to the shortage of supplies, the dal was weak and watery as soup. People did not have money because they feared working during the war. The army stole money from businessmen. The diaspora from Canada, USA, and France sent money to help relatives. I asked businessmen to help the people obtain money. Hundreds of casualties arrived at the hospital daily. I arranged mobile and outpatient clinics to serve patients injured by the military. The road was guttered and blocked. I negotiated with the Red Cross to inform the government that ships were needed to transport patients and their close nuclear families to Trincomalee. The Red Cross ships anchored about 3 kilometers from the beach. Fishing boats transported patients through choppy waters to the ship. After surgery, patients were shipped out to the sea. About 300 patients left weekly. The military called ceasefire, while patients were transported by the Red Cross. When the Red Cross left, the military aggressively fired, and more patients registered at the hospital. I dealt with the worst cases of amputations and stomach injuries. I had to cut down on the use of anesthesia because of the shortage. The Sri Lankan government placed a ban on foreign doctors, journalists, and organizations from entering the war zone. Eventually, the Indian government sent doctors to the war zone hospitals, close to Mullivaikkaal. The Red Cross delivered a small amount of medication for war-related injuries. The government blatantly refused to send blood and anesthesia. Fortunately, the LTTE provided us with medication. Since saline was limited, I improvised by using water from the king coconut. It was sterile and healthy. To our dismay, the coconut tree was bombarded by the military, which made it scarce. Tamil civilians who went to pluck coconuts off the palm tree were shelled. The army fired at hungry people in search of food.
Thank you, Lauren. Next, let's hear from Praveen Puvindran, a student at UNC and a member of North Carolinians for Peace Youth Group.
Ellarukum Vanakkam. The Sri Lankan War has left its mark on the lives of millions of Tamils worldwide. Among the 30 years of violence, in which hundreds of thousands of lives were lost, we are gathered here today to particularly remember the nearly 70,000 Tamils who were killed fighting for our freedom 13 years ago in Mullivaikkaal. Today marks the day that the Sri Lankan government ended the life of LTTE leader Velu Pillai Prabhaharan, bringing an end to the bloody civil war. This narrative is the extent to which many kids growing up in Sri Lanka know and are taught about this war that began and ended before their time. Tamil and Sinhalese alike, kids in Sri Lanka are being taught a misconstrued history of their nation and are not told about the heinous war crimes committed by their government. This is because the government that committed those crimes is the same one in power today, funding and running the public schools where they can censor and modify parts of history that they would not want the children to learn. This means that children growing up on the same land that blood was once shed over are never taught the history of their ancestors. In the English classes I conduct with Tamil kids living in Jaffna, any attempt to talk about the war or even the current economic and political status of the country is shut down. I vividly remember one class very soon after Maviranal, a day here that we as proud Tamils recognize to remember and commemorate those brave souls who lost their lives protecting our people. When I asked the young kids what they do to honor the day, the teacher quickly told me that it is not a day recognized in Sri Lanka, and any form of remembrance for those lost lives is dangerous for all involved. Her frightened tone and cautious attitude about the subject showed me how taboo the war and memorialization was, and struck a nerve in me, seeing how their freedom to remember their loved ones and learn about their history was stripped from them. I was recently given the opportunity of speaking with the U.S. Ambassador for Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, before her trip to the country. In this meeting, I was able to articulate to her a lot of the points and actions moving forward that I believe would bring us one step closer to justice and reconciliation. One of the main points I spoke on was human rights education for those in Sri Lanka in the K-12 levels, as well as higher education. Kids in Sri Lanka need to understand the impact that this war has had on the Tamil civilization. They need to understand that this was not a civil war. A civil war, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is a war between citizens of the same country. But from the day Sri Lanka gained independence in 1948 up until today, every single thing has been done to alienate and dehumanize the Tamil people in a country that they call home. It did not begin with the Civil War in 1983. One of the first massacres was the 1956 Tamil pogrom. Also in 1956 was the passing of the Sinhala Only Act, making Sinhalese the official language of Sri Lanka, and in the process marginalizing Tamils. Next was the first full-scale riot in 1958, murdering Tamils. And in 1972, the country was officially renamed Sri Lanka from its former name under colonial rule, Ceylon, giving it a Sinhalese identity and face. The 1977 riots were another series of brutal murders against Tamils, and in 1981, one of the largest library burnings of the 20th century occurred as Sinhalese mobs, ordered by the government, burned down the Jaffna Library, taking along with it more than 95,000 pieces of Tamil literature, art, and history. The Civil War erupts in 1983, shortly after Black July, a mass murder of an estimated 3,000 Tamils. Numerous other riots followed and ultimately culminated in the Mullivaikkaal massacre. This was not by any means a fair or equal fight in all meanings of the word. This was a methodical, systematic, ruthless, and cold-blooded genocide of an entire civilization by the government that was in power that was meant to protect them. I am standing here today as a proud Ila Tamilan, and to be able to say that out loud and understand a fraction of the true meaning behind my words is something that I am grateful for. It is something that I hope sooner than later can be said by the Tamil diaspora and kids growing up today in Sri Lanka. I am a born Canadian, and having grown up in Canada and the US, I was given a world of opportunities to grow and find myself in. It is because of those same opportunities that my relatives and friends raised in Canada, the US, and other parts of the world have now pursued their dreams and become successful Tamils leading prosperous lives. It is because of those same opportunities that some of the older youths here in NC were able to start North Carolinians Youth for Education, our youth organization that has continued to grow to this day. I am saying all this to show you all the wide breadth of lives just Tamils I know have been able to achieve. It amazes and inspires me to see Tamils my age and older prove time and time again that we can expand our horizons of success and prove that those who came before us did not sacrifice their lives in vain. Now, this is the same chance and opportunity that I hope kids growing up in Sri Lanka could have. They have been robbed of the truth of their history and heritage, and have since been restricted in what they can achieve and become. Canada is a prime example of where genocide education was implemented and Tamils were given the chance to learn and understand their history. And implementing human rights education curricula in Sri Lanka is the first step in the right direction. We need to keep working to bring justice to the Tamils, and that starts with bringing freedom and education to those living in our home country. The freedom to live, the freedom to express their feelings and thoughts, and the freedom to be treated equally as a human being. From birth to death, every Tamil, like every other human, deserves to know the meaning behind their identity and should be able to wear it proudly and pridefully throughout their entire lives. Because the Tamil culture is defined by unity, strength, and prosperity. Nandri Vanakkam.
Thank you, Praveen, for educating us on the history of Tamil struggle and identity. Now I invite Morrisville Councilman Steve Rao to speak. Steve Rao has been a councilman for more than 10 years and has been a friend of Tamils for several years. Let's hear from him.
Thank you, everybody. First of all, I just want to say it's an honor to be here today with the Tamil community. My father grew up in Chennai, Madras, and my great-grandfather, U. Rama Rao, was the Speaker of the upper house in the Madras legislature for the British Parliament, and then India, the nation of India, and went on to join the civil disobedience movement of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. So Tamil is home to me, and it's a pleasure to be here with so many friends and families. As the longest-serving Indian American in North Carolina, I want to say much has already been said, so I'm going to sort of not make up my speech, but I'm going to kind of come up with a whole new speech in a minute and a half. But I'm holding in my hand the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and actually was going to give this to Wiley as a gift, so I forgot to give it to him today. I got it in Atlanta, and at this museum in Atlanta, it says, when I got this book, that the inherent dignity and recognizing the rights of all members of the human family has always been and always will be the foundation of peace and justice in the world. And I think those words are something that we really have to hone in on today as we look at the Tamil Genocide, competing with the fire trucks. Hundreds of thousands of lives lost. We can only imagine what it felt like to have bullets pierce through your flesh, or the screams of women being assaulted, raped, these terrible rights being violated right before our very own eyes. And sometimes it's easy to only see what we want to see, to only hear what we want to hear. We have to really open up our eyes and see the tragedies and atrocities that occur in the world. So today we gather to pray and mourn the loss of those families. But we also gather to remember, I want to quote Dr. Martin Luther King, who had a great quote once that said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. And hate cannot drive out hate, only love can." And today we light our candles to honor those who lost their lives. But we also must remember that it's not just the light of a fire or a candle that gets us out of the darkness. It's the light and love of our hearts, our empathy, our compassion, recognizing, as that really brilliant young man spoke, a wonderful speech, that the right to vote, the right to assemble freely, the right to live your life without being tortured and imprisoned and ridiculed and raped and assaulted. These are basic rights that were all given to us, not by the hand of government, but as in the United States Constitution, by the grace of God. And so today I say that as we remember these Tamilians who lost their lives, We must also open up our eyes to what's going on in the world today. As we speak, the president of Russia is murdering and killing hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, justifying this not for oil. I don't think it's about oil. It's about bringing back imperial Russia, and he's willing to kill people, innocent people, in order to achieve his agenda. We saw 10 people in Buffalo gunned down in senseless violence by a member of our nation who claims that white supremacy justifies murdering innocent people. This is something that we must stop. The government of the United States must work with other nations around the world to make sure that human rights is something that we always recognize, and that no nation can murder and torture any member of a country because it violates their freedom and their human rights. I'll leave with a quote by President Abraham Lincoln, who presided over this country during one of the darkest and most divisive times. Hundreds of thousands died in the Civil War, many just a few miles from where I go to City Hall in Morrisville. And in his second inaugural address, he said, with malice towards all, malice towards none, charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the light. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up and heal the nation's wounds, to care for he who bore the battle, and to do all that we can to achieve a just and lasting peace amongst ourselves and all nations. Tonight, I thank you for inviting me today, but I ask that we pray for peace, for Tamil Nadu, that we pray for peace not only in our time, but for all time. We pray that the light will always take us out of the darkness. We pray that the love will always drown out the hate. And we pray that together we all can work together to fight for freedom and equality for all members of the human race. Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here, and I'm here to help support you in any way. And I look forward to working with Wiley Nickel and Deborah Ross in the U.S. Congress to continue to do these great things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rao, for the uplifting message and standing in solidarity with us as we seek justice for Tamil victims. Now let's hear a message from North Carolina Congressman David Price.
Dear friends, thank you for the invitation to join you this evening to observe Mullivaikkaal Remembrance Day. I regret that I am unable to attend in person, but wanted to add my voice to join those remembering the victims of the civil war in Sri Lanka, which ravaged the country for over 25 years. Tamil Americans come together for this observation not only to remember, but to call for accountability and justice following the massacre of more than 70,000 Tamil civilians. We must continue to advocate on behalf of these victims by fighting for justice, human rights, and democratic governance in Sri Lanka. Recent economic and political challenges in Sri Lanka underscore the importance of meaningful and inclusive dialogue from leaders and citizens to avoid further polarization. This work must include addressing the root causes of the civil war and finding a transparent political solution that will protect vulnerable religious and ethnic communities and prevent such acts of prejudicial violence from occurring again. As chairman of the House Democratic Partnership, I will continue to engage with the Sri Lankan Parliament to promote peace, justice, accountability, and a lasting reconciliation. Sincerely, David E. Price, Member of Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Premi, for reading that wonderful message. Now I invite young member of our community, Arshia Balamayuran, to speak about the impact of Mullivaikkaal massacre, or hearing about the Mullivaikkaal massacre.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kailanasha Devendran. Today I'm going to share with you all a small conversation I had with my father. From the time I can remember, my parents always talked about problems in Sri Lanka. They are particularly very sad and emotional during May. They watch film programs and news about May 18th Remembrance and Genocide Day. As a 10-year-old, I couldn't understand most of it, but understood something terrible had happened. One day I asked my father, why May 18th be a Remembrance Day for us, and what happened? My father told me that there was a civil war for 30 years in Sri Lanka, which is a motherland of my parents. The war broke out as a Tamil minority was suppressed of their rights. Tamil youths took arms to fight against the government forces to save their own people. In 2009, the war peaked, and the government forces took inhumane means to kill the Tamil civilians to end the war. My father sadly pointed out that the military troops first informed the civilians to take refuge in schools, churches, and temples. When people took shelter, they bombed and shelled these places and killed all the people who took refuge and didn't have any arms in their hands. The government portrayed to the world that this was a war against terrorism, but we Tamils remember the end day of the war, killing thousands of Tamils as Tamil Genocide Day. I was very sad to learn this, and deaths of thousands of school children of my age were killed inside a school. My father also added that he had seen some gruesome pictures from these killings. He could not show me those, but he showed me two photos which showed a baby girl who was trying to drink milk from her dead mother. It broke my heart. As a U.S. citizen, we were all taught from second grade what are rights without hurting others. I was deeply saddened that people were killed because they were from the minority and asked for their rights. My little heart questioned why we could not bring the people who killed Tamil civilians to justice. My father said we have been trying to do this for years. We still believe in justice, and one day we will try them in courts. Until then, we will remember this day, educate the world about the atrocity of the Sri Lankan government against the Tamil people. I silently agree with him and wanted to participate in this cause. I join him today.
Thank you so much. It is really uplifting for us to see our youth participate in this event, and we can rely on them to carry the struggle forward after our time is over. Next, I invite Manoj Nityananda Raja to read a poem written by our own Dr. Sivayohan Nahalinga.
We walk together, walk together. We walk one after another, touching each other, remove all the clothes properly, and walk like a dog. One army man shouted with irritation. We must go as there was shelling behind us. Without knowing what to do, just listen to that army man. No one should experience this, even if he win. Forgot the shame and walked in the open space. A father with his daughter and his married wife, brother-in-law and niece, and wrestler uncle, elder sister and elder brothers who once played happily, a teacher in the neighborhood and the doctor who lived in a big home, the family of the friends, an astrologer and a priest, the people who lived in the path of truth, worshipping the laughing army by two hands, to save our life as we did not have anything else to lose. Enduring the pain of the injured wound, half alive, and half an appetite, keeping the baby in the womb, and with menstruation on that day. Carrying the burden of insults and controlling the weeping, we were shivering as they were hissing like snakes. We cannot give food to crying babies too. Walk together the hugging hands of Lord Buddha. Walk nakedly after losing everything.
Thank you, Manoj, for coming forward to read this moving poem. Next, we'll hear from Adushan Sudarshan, an 8th grader and a youth from North Carolinians for Peace Community.
Vanakkam. We are gathered here on this important day to remember the Tamil Genocide. As a second-generation Tamil American, I have been educated by my parents about the importance of May 18th. It is a day to be remembered by every Tamil around the world. In 2009, when the final stages of the war were still happening, I was just a 1-year-old baby. Although I don't remember anything, my appa told me stories about what my parents did during that time to support our fellow Elam Tamils, even while living in the United States. Our family drove up to Washington, D.C. from here at every chance we got to protest in front of the White House, pleading to help the suffering Tamils of Sri Lanka. The final war was conducted as a war without witness, because the Sri Lankan government at that time asked all the international press and NGOs to leave the country before they started the major killing spree of civilians. Today is also the 13th death anniversary of my great uncle, my grandma's sister's husband. I call him Ammappa. He was killed a few hours after he surrendered to the Sri Lankan security forces, along with many others who were killed on the same day. It was a cold-blooded murder, a war crime, along with hundreds others killed in the same way that day. This was a crime against humanity. It has been 13 years since the incident, and still the perpetrators of this crime have still not been brought to justice even now. My Amama told me about my Ammapa's death. She told me, I turned on the TV at 11 a.m. and changed the channel to the news and saw him, your Ammapa, dead on the floor. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't do anything. I felt useless. What has happened to the Tamil people is clearly a genocide. We should all work together to bring these criminals in front of the international justice mechanisms and serve justice to the victims. In addition, we should also make sure this level and intensity of human suffering does not happen anywhere in the world, anytime in the future, and not even to our enemies. I'm looking forward to the day in my lifetime in which this day, May 18th, is internationally accepted as the Tamil Genocide Day, and the perpetrators of this genocide are brought to justice. Nandri Vanakkam.
Thank you, Adu, for speaking about your family's personal experience. Thanks again. We have a few more programs, but I want to ask all of you to stay till the end of the program, where we are planning to serve kanji, which is the only meal available to those who left in the Mullivaikkaal during the last day. So please stay and have kanji before you go. Now I invite Mayuran Vairakanne to say a few words.
Mohan Vairakanne.
Oh, is it Mohan or Mike? Amaran, I'm so sorry.
Cool. So, the dead were strewn everywhere. The wounded lay along the roadsides, begging for help from those still able to walk, but often not receiving it. Some had to be torn away from the bodies of their loved ones left behind. The smell of the dead and the dying was overwhelming. This was a quote from the UN panel of experts report on the Mullivaikkaal massacre. Approximately 330,000 innocent Tamil civilians were trapped on a small piece of land at the end of the war. The Sri Lankan government had already ordered all international media and UN aid workers to leave the area in order for the genocide to take place with no international eyes watching. The Sri Lankan government then rapidly shelled the dedicated no-fire safe zones with no remorse. Over 140,000 innocent Tamil children, women, and men were massacred, and 25,000 to 30,000 were severely injured. This is just one of the major state-sponsored attacks that were conducted on innocent Tamil civilians. Sri Lanka was constructed on a singular Buddhist ideology that persecuted the minorities on the island, including Burghers, Christians, Tamils, and Muslims. They conducted a well-planned genocide against the Tamils, which started with racist laws designed to disenfranchise the Tamil population. Afterward, over 100,000 civilians were locked up in internment camps where they faced rape, torture, and disappearances from Sinhala soldiers. Tamils still have no rights or freedoms to mourn the lost lives of their loved ones, and the Tamil-dominated areas of the north and the east continue to be militarized. The government's intention to dominate the Tamil areas is a really bad plan. The state machinery is in full swing to convert historic lands, monuments, and places of worship of Tamil people to Buddhist temples. The government is quickly claiming private and state land for distribution to the Buddhist temples. Land grabbing under the guise of archaeological excavations has also increased in the past year throughout the north and the east. In just the Mullivaikkaal district, various departments of the Sri Lankan government has claimed tens of thousands of acres of land. So how can we get justice for the Tamil people? First and foremost, there must be recognition. Like Praveen said, the students in Sri Lanka are still not allowed to recognize the genocide, and anyone who tries to is putting their life in danger. More than a decade, the United Nations member states still shy away from the use of the word genocide. Despite facts and evidence strongly supporting a legal finding of genocide, refusing to use the word genocide to describe the atrocities committed against the Tamil people is a slap in the face. The UN withdrew from the war zone around September 2008, thus enabling the genocide, which makes them partially responsible. Furthermore, by not using the word genocide, countries are freeing themselves of their responsibility to hold the perpetrators accountable. The next step in achieving justice is getting accountability. The perpetrators of the genocide must be identified and tried in the International Criminal Court or a separately created tribunal. Moreover, all war criminals must be sanctioned and have travel restrictions placed on them. These criminals have no fear of retribution and travel freely around the world. Like many of us know, the Rajapaksas live in the US and store a lot of their money here and across the globe, and we need to be able to sanction them and seize their assets to prevent them from using their money for bad causes. This also empowers them to continue subjugating Tamil civilians to excess surveillance, harassment, and torture. Additionally, the Sri Lankan government must demilitarize the northern and eastern provinces of Sri Lanka. In one district, there's more than one soldier for every 2 civilians, making it one of the most heavily militarized regions in the world. Even to this day, government-sponsored gangs continue to harass and threaten activists and civilians. These threats must stop immediately, and any civilians being unjustly held by the government should be released. To prevent this genocide from ever happening again, the Sri Lankan government must implement a devolution of power from the center to the provinces. As we've all seen, the central government of Sri Lanka clearly cannot be trusted. Allotting the Tamil provinces more autonomy will better allow them to implement policies that can help these war-torn areas develop. The United Nations must also introduce policies on handling ethnic conflict and the transition to peace. Its decision to pull out of Sri Lanka in 2008 was a catastrophic mistake that led the groundwork for the genocide to happen with no international eyes watching. We must continue our fight for justice and stay strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Amaran, for that wonderful speech and giving us hope that the day that a lasting solution for Tamil struggle is not too far away. We have a couple of more programs. There will be a concluding remark by Dr. Elias Jayaraja, and Ishani Walter will talk about Kanji and significance. Before that, I would like to invite anyone in the audience if you want to say a few words.
Thank you, Friends of North Carolina, for peace doing this. On this day, thousands of our brothers and sisters were killed without showing any humanity, and asked them to assemble, telling them they will give a safe haven, and dropped the prosperous bombs on them. And today we remember these lives they lost. Those lives are not just lost, they are the seeds for the future freedom of our Elam brothers and sisters, and we will continue the fight. We will continue to remember this day. We will educate our generation to come. I'm glad to see a lot of young people, young students talking about this event 5 years ago when compared to the 5 years ago. This is what we are supposed to do. Educate, remember the days, bring those criminals to the justice, and one day the freedom will come. And all our brothers were died because they were just Tamilians. All our sisters were died because they were just Tamilians. They did not ask for anything, just only for the peace and the dignity in the land that was inherited by us. And we will continue to educate, we will provide the support, and we are sure that one day we will get the freedom. Our brothers and sisters will get the dignity to live in those land. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paradipandi. Now I hand the mic over to Dr. Elias Jayaraja.
நண்பர்களே, இரண்டாம் உலக மகாயுத்தத்தின் முடிவிலே 6 மில்லியன் யூதர்கள் கொல்லப்பட்டதன் பின்பு யுனைடெட் நேஷன்ஸிலே கொண்டு வந்த பிரகடனத்தின்படி அவர்கள் நெவர் அகெயின் என்று ஒரு சுலோகத்தையும் முன்வைத்தார்கள். இருந்த பொழுதிலும் இனப்படுகொலைகள் தொடர்ந்தன. And the Tamil Genocide in Sri Lanka happened to be the first genocide that took place in the 21st century. It was quickly followed by the Syrian genocide, and as we speak, it's continuing in Ukraine as a genocide against the Ukrainian people by Russia. So the never again, it looks like a slogan of not much value. UN have some mechanisms and conferences they have had for a long time calling for a right to protect, the responsibility to protect, or R2P, and we should urge our governments to work actively to bring R2P, responsibility to protect, so that nations can intervene and prevent these mass-scale atrocities around the world. தமிழர்களை பொறுத்தவரையிலே நாங்கள் இந்த இனப்படுகொலைக்கு இனசங்காரத்துக்கு பொறுப்பு கூறலும் நீதியையும் நிலைநாட்டுவதற்காக எல்லோருமாக சேர்ந்து இந்த 13 வருடங்களாக உழைத்துக் கொண்டு வருகின்றோம். நாங்கள் we are survivors of a genocide. We heard personal stories from the families affected. We are all affected. And as survivors, we have a special responsibility to remember those who perished and to make sure they get justice. And that our journey towards justice and an equitable political solution that guarantees non-recurrence must continue. It also, in the current economic conditions Sri Lanka is going through with the turmoil, it presents some opportunity to make some advances as far as the Tamil rights are concerned. So we have to be open-minded. The Godagogama protests are held by people with an average age of 20. That means during the end of the Mullivaikkaal genocide, they were only 7 years old. This is a new generation that grew up after the war, and they may not necessarily have the prejudices of their fathers and mothers. And they have made some special effort to understand the Tamil struggle, and we should also make an effort to reach out at least another hand towards them and to see whether we could advance together to some extent when possible. So we should not waste this opportunity. Our leaders should proactively try to do what they can do. As of yesterday, in the Godagama in Columbus Goldface, they celebrated Mullivaikkaal and shared Mullivaikkaal Kanji, and they were trying to teach the rest of the people over there what happened to Tamils. So let's not lose hope. Our U.S. ambassador, Julie Chung, is a very seasoned diplomat, and she is very, very active. I have had the opportunity to have meetings with her 3 or 4 times already, and she is going to be a great asset for Tamils, for them to make advances. And in all her tweets, she has been mentioning not only the accountability part, she has been urging a just political solution. So we should build on that. So let's not lose hope. Let's continue on this path until we have justice for all. And as a token of recognition for genocide, the news just came that the Canadian Parliament has passed a unanimous resolution recognizing May 18th as Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day today. So this is the very first time such an international government recognition has been accorded. For that, you all did your part, bringing about the recognition. Therefore, let's not lose hope. Let's build on this. தமிழினத்தின் தாகம் தமிழீழத் தாயகம். நன்றி.
Nandri. I think we are nearing the end. I'm going to invite Ishani to talk about the significance of Kanji. Before that, I would like to thank everyone who worked hard to make this event possible. And thank you all for coming and joining us today.
It was the final few days of the genocidal war against the Tamil nation in 2009. The government of Sri Lanka conducted a genocidal war without witnesses, with continuous bombardment in the no-fire zones and the hospital against the Tamil nation. The people who were determined to stay were surrounded by starvation and death. Money had no value and there was no food to satisfy their hunger. Apart from a very limited supply of rice, no other food items were accessible to the people. A systematical food ban was imposed to use starvation as a weapon of war. The only meal available to those people was a handful of rice cooked in water with a pinch of salt, and only if they could find a ladder. It is called Mullivaikkaal Kanji. Famished children, the elderly, and pregnant mothers languished in long lines.
Thousands among Kiwi for Kanji perished from the endless assaults of artillery shells and cluster bombs directed at them. Many people died while they were waiting for kanji, as kanji pots quickly turned to blood. Mullivaikkaal kanji became one of the symbols of genocide. It represents the hardship of our people when going through the last phase of the genocidal war. By having this Mullivaikkaal kanji, not only are we remembering the genocide that happened 13 years ago, but we are also seeking for justice. Until the world listens to our people's resistance and distressed demands for justice, it is our historical duty to preserve Mullivaikkaal kanji in our collective memory as a symbol of immense and a painful tragedy. Mullivaikkaal kanji marks a moment in the history of our people who were forced to rise and fight for justice and for the life of dignity. Thank you.
So let's everybody have a little bit of kanji here.
Thank you, Ishani. And I especially want to thank all of the youth who came forward to participate in this event today.
விதைத்த இடங்கள்